Now, the second session is on how and why become an open source contributor by Mr. Yohan Lasorsa. He's a senior developer advocate at Microsoft. So let's welcome him. Over to you, Johan.
Thank you for this introduction. So, hi everyone. I hope you're doing good today. So, the goal of this talk is to give you a bit of hints of how and why you can contribute to this big community that is open source. And I hope that at the end of this talk, you'll all be willing to try and at least become open source contributors. So, first, for a quick introduction, so I'm Yohan, and I work as a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. I'm more focused on everything around web technologies, and I've been diving in these big open source communities for many years now, and I'm taking part of it, contributing to some big projects and also maintaining a few open source projects of my own. So if you want to reach out, you can always join me on Twitter or GitHub. My DM are open if you want to ask questions during this talk or afterwards. It will be my pleasure to answer anything you might be wondering. So just before I dive into the content, I would like to make this session as much as interactive as possible. So if you have any question, just don't hesitate to put it in the chat. I'll also be looking at Twitter. I created a thread. You can join in by following this link or this QR code. Don't hesitate to ask questions. And if I can't answer your question live, I'll be looking at it afterwards and come back to it. So first, just to give some root for this talk, I would like just to take a few minutes to talk about open source itself. So what is open source software? So if we take like this formal definition, open source software is a software whose source code is released under license, which grants anyone the rights to inspect, modify, and distribute it for any purpose. And the two important things in this definition is source code and the license part. One thing is that open source, by making the source code available for everyone, doesn't make it impossible for you to sell the results of what you're creating. That means that it's not, that open source doesn't mean that everything that you're doing, you have to give it for free, as in freebie, I would say, because it's possible to make money based on open source software. There are a lot of companies nowadays that are doing just that. It's also possible to work into the open source ecosystem and make a living from it. So it's a bit different than just giving all your softwares for free. There's a lot more than that. You may also be wondering what's the difference between open source and free software, because that's two joint communities, but it isn't exactly the same. Free software is part of the bigger open source communities, but the opposite isn't true, because when you're making free software, you're giving everyone the rights, like open source software, the rights to inspect, modify, and distribute your code, but you're also giving some restriction, meaning that everyone that will be using your code will have also to release it under the same license. That's it. I said the word. The important part here is the license. So if we take a look at the popular open source license right now, it dives into two different categories. On one side, we have like we call the permissive license. You've probably heard of the MIT license, the BSD one, or the Apache one. That's like the most common used one. Basically, it means that if you're using a software that is released under one of these licenses, you can make some modification to it. You can even, if you want, don't release this modification and sell your software, your modified software as you wish. You can also mix some of the open source code, for example, that's using the MIT license with some proprietary code. And you can do that without having any constraints into releasing the results of that code combination. But that's not exactly true if you're looking at the copyleft license, which are the one used if you're referring to free software in general. So the most commonly used one is the GPL. That means that if you're including some code that is under the GPL license on your project, it means that you also have to release under GPL any modification that you may have made to the source code, and you can't mix GPL code with proprietary source code. Otherwise, you have the constraint to release all your code under GPL. So the license is what separates what I would say like the general open source community and the free software community, which is something a bit different that like impose some freedom principles upon your project. So in more general, I'll be talking as open source, but I thought that would be like nice to give you some insights about this difference. So now let's start into the big subjects. So why start contributing into open source? The first reason is that open source will probably and is probably already driving your company. You may not be aware of it, but you are already using a lot of open source software like in everyday's life. Your PC, your smartphone, your TV, even your fridge or your car probably is based partly or fully on open source software. And even if you're a student, if you're already working in tech, and especially if you're a developer, as a developer, it's like your everyday's job to use sometimes open source software to create new software that will make money for your company. But basically, it's what will allow you to work and earn money is partly thanks to open source. And it's something also that it's part of, thanks to open source software, that the tech community has been so big and thriving since I would say like year 2000. Especially the startup ecosystem couldn't have lived without open source software, and it's what has been driving this fast tech evolution we've seen is open source, because you don't have like to reinvent everything from the root every time you want to start a new project. You can reuse some of the work that people have already done and released under an open source license. So you can like build on it, create something new, something more innovative. You can focus on what's really important for your business, instead of having like to go through the basics every time again. So it's really thanks to open source, basically, if you're working in a tech company, that you can make money nowadays. So. And also open source is just one of many pillars that serves in many domains, in something that can open you also a lot of doors during your life, but also your career. It's also part of something really bigger, I would say a bigger culture of knowledge sharing that drives innovation and that also drives many communities. Like, for example, if you're attending this conference, you're also in some way part of this already big open source communities. But you can just know that there are a lot of other open knowledge communities that you can take part of. You may also have heard of open data for data scientists sharing data sets, so other ones can train like their machine learning models on open data sets, and also access what have already the work that has already been done from other researchers before them. That also applies to educations, that applies to cloud computing, business, even hardware, and even on the creative sides to music, graphics, and many other domains around that. So it's only like a small part of this big knowledge sharing and very open communities. So now, if you like narrow it down to you, why you as an individual should contribute into this open source community? What's the benefits for you? So one of the first thing is you can just start and take part into this community because you love the philosophy of sharing content and taking part of something that's bigger than you, like I said, contributing to this tech ecosystem in general. But most of the time, that's not the only reason that you're doing that. One of the most important reasons, and I've learned also to take advantage of that over the years, is that it's like one of the most efficient way to learn and learn new skills and own your technical knowledge, because you'll be working on very high technical projects. If that's your wish, you will be collaborating with very smart people. You will be giving and also be under code reviews. You will be learning about this whole collaboration process. Basically, it's a great way to learn if you're students, but also if you're already working in tech, especially if you're looking to learn new tech that you're not using in your everyday job. It's also very important to build your network, because collaborating with other projects, you will get to know a lot of different peoples. You will get to know a lot of different opinions, and you will be making also new friends that can help you maybe find your next job. And since I've started diving into this open source community, I've received personally a lot of work proposition just based on some open source project I've released on GitHub. And also just to be completely transparent, I think my current job, and I think like the 2 previous job after that, the fact that I was an open source contributor and very active in this community took a very high part into why I was recruited for that jobs. And I don't think I would be like in Microsoft right now speaking about open source if I wasn't already taking part in this community before joining the company. So it's really a great way to improve your visibility and make yourself also more connected to other folks in the ecosystem. It's also it's something that has been very growing recently. I think it's also a good way, especially if you're a student or if you're looking to make extra money, to just make money by making contribution. There, if you want to give some search, you have this new website called Bounty Source or Issue Hunt that gives the possibility to assign a bounty to some specific issues on open source projects. And if you making the job to fix a problem or to add a features that's in that specific issue, you will be issued the amount of the bounty, meaning that you can make money just by contributing to specific issue and open source. And now there are a few different websites where you can search on them if you're looking into that. To see what issues have an attached bounty if you want to work for something more concrete. And then also because it's fun, you will be interacting with a lot of people, and that's also part of the fun in taking part in this open source community. Also on a different topic, but also the same one, we've been told, at least that's what it is when I've been through engineering school in France, that like taking part in tech, especially if you're a developer, is like something as walking alone with machines. That's like what is in general knowledge. It's commonly like it's the common thing, but in truth, it's completely the opposite when you start diving into real life work, because a big part of software development is communication. You have to write code and talk to machines, but more importantly, you have to work with all your peers, from other developers. You also have to talk and get information from end users, get feedback. You also have like to answer to everyone who have a stake in your project. You have to discuss with all the UX team, with designer, to see how you need to create your software. You also have to discuss with the product team. Basically, your developer is like a central point in the communication of a project, and that's only like for the first, I would say, circle of communication. Because outside of your immediate circle, you will be talking to a few different people outside. You will have to talk with other teams from your company to get feedbacks, to learn new things, to just basically share information and knowledge about development, just to get faster, to get better at your everyday job. And bigger than that, you have like the right, and also it's something very recommended, is to like go outside of your company and get knowledge, get insights from one of these bigger communities, like development communities or open source communities, just like what you're doing by attending this conference right now. So by attending meetups, for example, by attending conference, by taking part in open source projects, you're also getting different opinions that what you usually get in your everyday job, and getting different opinions, and especially constructive feedbacks. It's also very important, like to build your tech skills, and also not just get like the echo chamber effect that you have when working closely with like your everyday peers in a project, who you usually get only positive feedback after some point. So it's nice to get some other point of view from like someone exterior to your immediate project. Also, if you're taking part in the open source community, you will get visibility. That means your specific profile will get more desirable for people who are looking to hire tech people. For example, if you're a developer, as I said, I've received many job opportunities just because I released a few open source projects and taking part in these communities. So that's not something mandatory if you're looking to have a job in tech, but that's something that really gives you an edge because it's easy to show the result of your work. And also, it's also, I would say, sometimes a way to skip parts, the most difficult part of interviews. I know from personal experience, and also let's just give you the example of a friend. He's the one who referred me to Microsoft, just for the small information. But before joining Microsoft, he made this open source project. It was on Windows Phone at the time. It was like a to-do list. He released an open source, and it was quite popular at the time. And then at some point, when he looked into joining Microsoft, he saw that the team that was making this to-do app in Windows was looking for new people. So he just pinged some people from the team. And he didn't have at the time to pass any technical interview because people were looking at his GitHub profile. They saw the code that he already made, and they just said, like, it's okay. We had a look at your code. We know what you're capable of doing. So we don't have to go through this like boring tech interview when you have to answer all these puzzles and stuff. So basically, it also gives you a more easy path sometimes into getting new jobs and going through interviews. So no, I hope that just after the small talk, you're motivated to start making your first contribution if you already didn't do it before. So just first, a few ground rules before making your first contribution. You don't have to fear that. I don't know why. I also experienced that a few years ago when I just started in this community, but people just tend to make making your first contribution in some, I don't know why you fear making your first contribution. I don't know if it's like the feedback, having something in public, just I don't know, but sometimes it might be fearful. But you don't have to be an expert. Sometimes it's like the first barrier into making your first meaningful contribution is that you think, I cannot contribute, for example, to Kubernetes or to Angular because these projects are highly technical, and I don't feel that I'm an expert enough. You don't have to be an expert. Everyone has some contribution that you can do to any open source project. So that's the first thing. You also don't have to write code if you don't want to. There are a lot of different ways. I'll go into that in the next slides, but you have different ways to contribute to open source, and it doesn't always mean that you have to write code. If you don't feel like it, you can still be an open source contributor, even if you never write a line of code. You also don't have to know the project maintainers. You don't have to ask anyone's permission before sending a contribution. It's always nice to take the temperature if the project have a chat, to go and chat with the maintainers just to have better chance of getting your contribution accepted. But you don't have to ask the permission of anyone to be able to contribute to any open source project. And also, I think it's a good advice to not aim to make a big contribution first. My advice is to always start small because if you don't know the people you have in front of you maintaining the project, you don't always, when you're starting contributing to one specific project, you don't always know what was in the mind of contribution. So if that doesn't work out, you'll be less frustrated if you made a small contribution than making if you have worked for weeks on something very big and at the end it doesn't get accepted. So you should always start small. It's one of the ground rules, and you should not give up because it doesn't work always like on your first try. You will probably have feedbacks on your contributions, meaning that you may have to change a few things for your contribution to get accepted. But at the end, I'm probably sure that things will work out. So what's the first step when you want to make your first open source contribution? So if you don't know where to start, there are a few different tools that you can use for that. And the first one is this website called First Contribution. Let me open that link for you. I'll zoom in a bit. Basically, it's a website where you can find a lot of open source projects that have specific issues that are friendly for first-time contribution. So there are a lot of different projects. You can just filter for whatever you feel more confident to contribute for. For example, as I'm a web developer, I can look at JavaScript projects. Let's say I want to contribute to React. So, okay, I go to this project and you will be taken to the issue part. You will be taken to GitHub first, the GitHub page of the project, into the issue section that is already filtered out for you to some good first issue that are takeable by first-time contributors. And you can just have a look at this good first issue tag because that's the one that is important for you. You can just go through a few different issues and see if someone's talked to you. Going through the issue, you can there's already generally a description of what you're expected to do if you want to take this task. You can also have a look if someone already assigned itself to the project. For example, you can see here that this particular user assigned itself to the project, to this issue. So you shouldn't be working on it because someone already is. So once you have done that, you can start working on the issue. If you don't want to go through GitHub, there are also something very quick. If you have Node.js installed on your machine, you can use this command, npx good first issue. That will basically do the same thing, but make the hard chores for you. For example, if I open this terminal here, I type in this command. It will take a few seconds to get everything. So I'm asked to choose a project. Let's say I want to contribute to Babel, for example. And then it will pick out automatically a random issue in GitHub for me that is good to work on. So it's currently unassigned, so that's good news. And I can take a look at this link and see what it is about and see if I want to contribute to this particular issue. So usually you get a lot of context to help, especially if it's your first time contributing to the project. So that's good. And then you can just say you want to work on this particular issue and go on through the work. Also, if you have if you're more confident about finding a good project for you, you can just go on GitHub, go to your favorite projects, and just look out for the good first issue tag. That's like a common thing that is used by project maintainers to identify these issues that are especially more targeted towards first-time contributors that are usually more easy to pick up. And you can just go on like that if you have a more concrete idea on which projects you want to contribute to. Just some tip before making any contribution, just check the project activity before. Like one of the first open source contribution I made years ago. There's still no one that has reviewed them because I didn't check that before. And it turns out that I sent pull requests to projects that weren't actively maintained. So it's good to have a look at the pull request section to see when was the last commit that was merged into this project, to see if there's activity, and to see basically if you have a good chance of having your contribution accepted at the end. Now, the second step is to actually work on the project. And how do you make your first pull request? A pull request is when you will be sending your contribution back to the project on GitHub. But if you've never been doing a pull request before, you also have this GitHub repository. I put the link in there. That's called First Contribution. And they have an excellent tutorial on how your first pull request should be made using all the GitHub tools. So you can just follow on the tutorial that includes forking the repository, then cloning the repository on your local machine, making a change to some file, for example, adding your username. First, you have to create a new branch using Git, make the change and commit the change to your local copy of the project, pushing those changes to GitHub, and then creating the actual pull request where project maintainers will be able to review your pull request and ultimately give you some feedback and accept or reject your changes. So this one, all of your pull requests will always be accepted on this project. So that's a very good place to start if you've never made a pull request on GitHub before. So that's a really good repository to just try getting a hangs of all those tools and see how it works. So just to see something if you plan to work on an issue on a specific project, you have already shown that just before. If you have some specific work in mind, don't forget to go into the project and tell other people that you're planning to work on it. Basically, assign this issue to yourself if it's possible, so other people know that someone is already working on this particular thing. Now, when it's time to submit your pull request, there are also a few things that can increase the chance of having your contribution accepted by the project. The first thing is to read the contribution guidelines before submitting. Most of big open source projects have already a guide for first-time contributors with a few rules on how you should write code. If there's something specific that you must include with your pull request, it's usually, even if it's not mandatory by a specific project, it's usually a good thing to describe the changes that you made and why you made these changes. Is it to fix a particular bug? Is it to fix a particular issue? If you've taken an issue from the project, you can just link to it in the pull request description and give some insights about why you make this change and why it might be good for the project to accept it. And then just be mindful that open source project maintainers may have I would say an everyday life like you. They may have a side job. Open source might be their primary source of income. So there are a very big chances that they won't be looking at the repository every day, every hour. So just be patient. And it doesn't help in general to ping maintainers on email. Just don't do that. Wait for people just to go through your pull request. If they can't look at it right now, usually in a few days, they will have a look at it, and be open to feedback, because that's one of the important things. You'll probably receive feedback, and a big part of the open source cycle is to receive this feedback to understand what needs to be changed, and also don't take it as any personal attack, but as a mean to improve your skills. Sometimes it might be long, it might be a month if you haven't looked at the project activity before, or if there's a lot of open source contributions that are made to a specific project. In very big projects, it's hundreds of open source to review every day. So it might take some time to receive feedback. But don't worry, eventually you'll get that. And I said also before that code isn't the only way to contribute to a project. There are very different ways to help any open source project. And the first one will be like to talk about the project. And if you like a particular project, talk about it on social networks, share it on Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatever is your favorite mean of communicating. Just give some promotion to the project. It's always like the first way to help any open source project. If you have some particular experience with that project, you can also help to answer some of the questions that may be on Stack Overflow or on GitHub issues. If you know the answer, just take some of the time to go through that, and it will be very helpful to the project maintainers. You can also go through the documentation and fix some errors if there's any. That's a very a good way to make a good first contribution to a project is to fix or to add anything to the documentation. It's also very appreciated. It's very difficult in general for open source project maintainers to translate all the docs in different languages. So if you can help with that, that's very, very appreciated. And it's a very meaningful way to contribute to a project, making this project accessible to a lot of other different peoples. You can report bugs. That's also a form of contribution because if you don't know that something is wrong, nobody is gonna look at it to fix it. So reporting bug and especially writing detailed, good bug reports with a mean to reproduce your issue is also very appreciated. Something that everyone hates to write, that includes open source project maintainers, is to contribute to the test base. You can write more tests for a project you like, especially if you had a bug that wasn't catched by the existing test base before. It's always appreciated, even though that's not the most fun way to contribute to open source. But if you like writing unit tests, it's always a good way to contribute to any projects. Or you can also have different skills. For example, if you're a good designer, you might try to help a project. If it doesn't have a logo, you can like design a nice logo for this project, or any way you can name it. There are many different ways to help, and I'm sure you can even think of new ways that are not in this list. So just don't focus only on code. I know that in open source, one of the major things that is shared is code, but it's not the only way really that you can help contribute to a project. Now, when you've made your contribution, sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't work out on the first time. So maybe that your contribution doesn't like fit the mindset of the project. Maybe it wasn't something that was looked after, or maybe someone just made the same contribution as you planned to did like a few hours before you. So that's okay. That happens. But I can guarantee you that once your first contribution will be accepted, it will be like a small party, and it's usually also inciting you to contribute even more. And that's how you usually end up like deep in the knees, like me, in this open source ecosystem. This month in particular is a very good opportunity to contribute to open source projects because it's Hacktoberfest. That means for the whole month of there will be a lot of open source projects that will be especially mindful to first-time contributors. And if you want to participate in the Hacktoberfest project, you might like be giving some goods once you make 4 pull requests that gets accepted on a particular project. So it's like just a nice incentive to participate throughout the whole month of October. So it's usually a good party. Like you can get this t-shirt. That's the one I got last year just by participating in this. So if you don't know what will be like a good time to start making contribution in the open source ecosystem, I would say it's just right now during this month. It's a very good motivation to start because there will be a lot of different people that will be doing just the same thing as you. On a more regular thing, every Friday is Open Source Friday. If you want to find some place like to relax at the end of the week and make some meaningful work just to change from your regular routine, you can do that. It's also another website where you can just share your love of open source with other people who are willing to contribute every Friday. This is something that you can have a look and take part in it. I would say first, thank you for attending to this talk. It's only the first step. I hope that you could learn something from everything I said. I'm giving you the links to these slides and also to a few other resources that I think that might be useful if you're looking to make your first contribution in this big community that is open source. So thanks. And if you have any question, you can ask them in the chat, or you can ping me always on Twitter at any time later. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan, for a lovely session.